daughter was away at college. It was her freshman year, and she came home and she was telling me about this new college program that she was involved in. And so I said, well, tell me about this. And she says, well, they're called neo-paganism. I sat her down and basically told her, there's two lists of people in this world, those that are lost and those that are found. I'm on the found list, you're on the lost list, you need to get found on the found list. And she became really offended by that, and was just very, it shut doors between us. Eventually I went back and I apologized to her for that, and it really was helpful, and it opened up the doors a little bit, and I think that in a lot of ways she felt that we were in a weird cult too, and she would make references. For example, she'd say, hey, Mom, don't drink the Kool-Aid when you go to church and things, I really want her to become a believer, and the more I push, the harder she turns away.
My kids as teens have journeyed to understand what does their faith mean to them. At times my daughter's journey looked like, well, I don't really have a faith. My son has been in a similar situation as he's grown up, and God has continued to say, Elisa, love him, accept him, believe me for him. Do not be afraid. I love him more than you can imagine loving him. Now, be aware you can influence him. You can influence him. Ask permission, be respectful, don't manipulate, let go, yield. Influence him through who you are and what you know of me, but don't take the responsibility to save him. That's my job. So there's a delicate line, I think, that we walk as parents, is that we think, well, if I have to let go of my responsibility to save my child, that means I just need to step out altogether. It's too painful to watch. It's too difficult. I don't get it. I can't control it. I want to give up. And I think God asks us to stay. But staying can look different in different seasons. It can look like being quiet. It can look like seeking understanding of what they're going through. It can look like listening. It can look like using a story. It can look like stepping back from each other and from the issue and together pointing towards something else. That father of the prodigal son may have let go, but he never washed his hands. He prayed, he waited, and he watched every day. And I think that's what God asks us to do for our children who get lost along the way.
Well, I'm here with Julie, Chris, and Holly. Thanks for joining us. In the prodigal son story, and there's the dad who keeps looking out over the horizon for the son to return. How did that story affect you?
I was a prodigal daughter. I was actually raised by Christian parents, and I, willingly, knowingly walked away from Christianity, knowing full well what I was doing. So I can really relate, knowing what it was like for me to come back and embracing it, really for my own and full-heartedly. And so I think it helps, having gone through the things I went through, to know maybe what the mindset or the attitude of someone else like that might be.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here watching my daughter do everything wrong. It's like you can see that she's, just being the prodigal son and heading in the wrong direction. And I'm still that dad that's standing there watching on the horizon and just waiting. And that's the thing, it's that waiting period that's the toughest.
How do you hang in there with family members?
It's tough. Sometimes it takes longer than you want, but a lot of the time it's just you waiting on what the Lord's doing. You have to always understand that you can't give up, because the Lord never gave up on you. And because he never gave up on you, I feel like, I owe that to my family. A lot of times I realize I have to wait, see what God's thinking, because he loves my family more than me, which is a hard thing to understand, because I love my family.
That's hard, isn't it? I have an older brother, and it took him about 8 years before he really surrendered his life to Jesus Christ. And early on, I was pushing, and just had to pull back and even give him a lot of space and time and distance. But then there was a point where I felt like God said, okay, get involved now and start doing some things with your brother. And so we built some things together, and it was amazing out of that time. Then it was just right.
Mm-hmm.
Evangelism or discipleship is just friendship with a vision. Being friends with the people around us to the extent that we love them so much that we couldn't help but dream dreams about what their lives could be like, could look like, could feel like if the resources of God were poured into them. I have a 13-month-old. I mean, I love this little sprout with a desperate, crazy love already. And it's only natural for me to dream dreams about what his life could be. It's just organic. It just spills out of me. I couldn't hold it back if I wanted to. Having that mindset and that heart check is what evangelism is all about.
I liked Evan's description of friendship with a vision. Do you have dreams for your friends who don't yet know Jesus Christ?
We just recently came back from a mission trip to Honduras, and a friend of ours is a dentist, and you know, we told him all about the trip, and I said, you have got to come down and do dental work in Honduras.
So when you think of him, you can see him doing this thing and being fulfilled.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
What are some of the things that you've done with your friends, or things that you've tried to share, ways that you've tried to share Christ with them?
I had a casual friend when I worked full time, and he knew where I stood and everything. And one thing that he responded really well to is I had been reading Myers-Briggs' book on personalities, and I brought it into work, and we just started figuring out who he was personality-wise, and he got such a great kick out of that because it's like I showed interest in who he was and how he was wired and what his personality was, and people really love learning about themselves. But I was amazed at how he changed his attitude just from knowing.
And became more open.
Oh, yeah.
Well, these are your friends, you know, we're talking about. You know, this is who I've always known, you know, or people that I've known because I am who I am. And the fact is, your life is the best ministry, you know, to them, you know. It's for you to live life. And by seeing your life lived differently, it speaks volumes. More volumes than anything you could almost say sometimes. Or even the things that you say fall in line with that, because it becomes, instead of you need to do this, it becomes, well, I did this, and man, I was really going through this, and the Lord just picked me up and he moved me along. And you'll start to see, you know, friends who are like, wow, you know, I really need to check that out.
My husband was very much the corporate guy, and he was, you know, type A personality type of thing, and was having a very difficult time at work before we became believers. Well, now he's much more relaxed. He's life is in perspective for him, and people have said to him, what is it that you're doing differently? You know, are you eating differently? Are you exercising more? You know, what's going on with your life? And so he'll tell them, hey, you know, I've been going to the church and this is what we've been doing. And he's had several people from work ask, well, I need to come to your church. I need to find out what you've, you know, this fountain of youth that you've found, you know, and
Isn't that
things.
interesting?
Yeah, it was really exciting. And a few of them have come. And so, you know, it's really been great that he's been able to, just by changing his attitude and the way he lives life, that he's been able to, you know, people have been able to see that reflection.
When I listen to somebody who has a totally different worldview than me, I have to first of all check, what's my goal here? I find lots of times my goal is to be right. My goal is to get my point across. My goal is to prove myself and my faith. And listening doesn't have a goal of being right. Listening, that's talking. Talking has that goal. Talking has a goal of getting a point across. Listening has a goal of understanding what somebody else is saying.
One of the most powerful tools in our evangelistic toolbox is the ability to ask meaningful questions and to listen well. And let's face it, if someone seems radically different from me, what is an obvious way for me to try to figure out how I can connect with them. I ask them questions about themselves, and I learn what they're all about, what makes them tick. I want to know them, and I want to listen for what God is already up to in their lives.
Can I identify with their emotions? Can I feel what they're feeling? Because if I try and feel what they're feeling, compassion comes. And when compassion comes, my need to be right or my need to get my point across is silenced. And instead, I can just sit with them and listen and hear, finally hear.
In this session, we talked about not giving up on family and friends when things get tough. We've talked about dreaming dreams, about what God desires for them, and listening to them in ways that keep doors open for future conversations. Wherever your relationships are at this moment, I hope this session was eye-opening and encouraging. If we allow God's love to overflow through our lives, we will naturally begin to see outflow toward our family and friends. In the next session, we're going to talk about being outward toward people who aren't like us.